In 2004, a young woman vanished from a crowded New York street, and for 20 years, no one knew why. But this year, her story came back, with a name no one expected. 20 years of silence. One piece of forgotten evidence. And when detectives reopened the case, they uncovered a secret that had been living right next door. A cold case cracked open after 2 decades, and the suspect's identity stunned the entire community. Stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe, because this case will leave you speechless. Sometimes, the scariest mysteries aren't the ones buried in the woods or whispered in small towns. Sometimes, they unfold right in the middle of the city, in plain sight, where the noise of life drowns out the sound of someone disappearing. It was June 18, 2004. New York City was alive the way only New York can be. Restless, sleepless, electric. Summer heat clung to the sidewalks, and neon lights rippled across rain-slick streets. Subways howled underground, taxis honked above, and the air carried that mix of exhaust and ambition that never really leaves the city. Among the millions moving through those streets that night was Erin Callahan, 27 years old, an elementary school teacher from Queens. She was the kind of person everyone described the same way: bright, careful, and kind. The type who triple-checked her locks, texted her sister every night, and never, ever took unnecessary risks. But that night, something shifted. That night, Erin vanished. And for 20 years, nobody knew why. Earlier that evening, Erin and a few friends gathered at the Clover Bar, a cozy spot on the Lower East Side. It was a celebration, a colleague's birthday. Music, laughter, and cheap cocktails filled the space. Erin was in good spirits, chatting about her students, her upcoming summer break, and a hiking trip she was planning with her sister, Megan. At around 11:40 p.m., she hugged her friends goodbye. The plan was simple. She'd grab a cab, head back to her apartment in Queens, and call it a night. Security footage later showed her stepping out of the bar. She paused at the curb, checked her phone, and looked around, as if waiting for someone. In the corner of the frame, a man stood near her. Tall, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. They exchanged a few words, brief, casual. Then Erin turned, walked toward the intersection, and disappeared from view. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When Erin didn't show up for her Saturday morning yoga class, her friends assumed she'd overslept. By afternoon, she wasn't answering texts. By evening, her sister Megan, worried, drove to Erin's apartment. The door was locked. Inside, everything looked normal. Her purse was on the counter. Keys missing. Bedmate. No sign of a struggle. But one thing was off. Her phone charger was still plugged in. Megan called the police around 9 p.m., reporting her sister missing. By the next morning, the case had escalated, because everyone who knew Erin said the same thing. She wouldn't just disappear. Detectives from the NYPD's 9th Precinct began what would become one of the most frustrating missing person cases in modern New York history. They retraced every step of Erin's final night. The bar staff remembered her. Friends gave their statements. But the man outside, the one in the dark jacket, was never identified. Police pulled traffic cameras, ATM footage, subway security, everything. For a few fleeting seconds, Erin's silhouette appeared again on footage from the corner of Rivington and Clinton, walking east, heading toward the Williamsburg Bridge. After that, nothing. Her cell phone records showed one final ping, around 12:07 a.m., near the Brooklyn side of the bridge. Then it went dark. No cab logs. No MetroCard swipe. No witnesses. It was as if Erin had stepped off the edge of the world. Within days, flyers covered phone poles across Manhattan and Queens. Missing, Erin Callahan, 27. Last seen June 18th. Her photo, bright smile, auburn hair, a blue sundress, stared from every street corner. Local news picked up the story. TV anchors described her as a responsible young woman with no reason to vanish. Volunteers joined the search. For weeks, People combed the banks of the East River, handing out flyers, shouting her name into the wind. But the river gave nothing back. Detective Ray Soto, leading the case, told reporters, "We're not giving up. Somebody saw something. Somebody knows something." But days turned into weeks. And hope, that fragile, flickering thing, began to fade. With no evidence of foul play, the public filled in the blanks. Some speculated Erin had met someone online, that she'd left willingly. Others claimed she'd been targeted by a serial offender active in the area at the time. Online forums buzzed with theories. But the Callahan family refused to believe any of them. Erin had no history of mental illness, no financial troubles, no reason to vanish. In one heartbreaking interview, her mother said, "Every night, I leave the porch light on, just in case she finds her way home." The years rolled by. Leads dried up. The case grew colder with every season that passed. Detective Soto retired in 2011. His last statement about the case still haunts many who remember it. "You get used to the noise of the city, but then you notice what's missing, and it's her voice." By 2014, 10 years had passed. Erin Callahan, now married with 2 kids, began to let go of hope. She kept Erin's room preserved, just as it was in 2004. The books on the shelf, the Polaroids on the wall, the hiking boots by the door. A small shrine to memory. "You stop hoping she's alive," Megan told a journalist quietly. "You start hoping she's not suffering." Despite time passing, New York didn't forget Erin. Her photo became part of the city's folklore, a face on missing person posters that people remembered even when the story was gone from headlines. Every June, strangers left candles and flowers near the Williamsburg Bridge, where she was last seen. To many, her disappearance became a warning. To her family, it remained a wound that never closed. What made the story so haunting wasn't just that she vanished, it was how. A woman disappears in a city of millions, surrounded by cameras, witnesses, and light. And somehow, no one saw anything. Here's something crucial, something that sat unnoticed for years. During the original 2004 search, police recovered a set of keys from the East River shoreline, about a mile from the bridge. They were rusted, tangled with a floral keychain, and logged as possible match, unconfirmed. Because back then, technology was limited. Touch DNA, the ability to extract genetic material from small, non-blood surfaces, didn't exist yet. So the keys were sealed in a paper evidence bag, labeled, and stored deep within an NYPD archive in Queens. Forgotten, collecting dust for nearly 2 decades. No one knew those keys would one day break open the silence. By 2024, forensic science had transformed. Cold cases once thought unsolvable were now being cracked open by next-generation DNA sequencing and advanced data analytics. That year, the NYPD launched a special task force, the Cold Case Integration Unit, dedicated to reprocessing evidence from 1990 to 2010. Analyst Rachel Mendoza, 29 years old, was part of that team. Her job? To digitize and re-examine forgotten case files. Late one night, she stumbled upon a thin, yellowed folder labeled Callahan, Erin, 2004, missing person. Inside were black and white photos, witness notes, and a small log entry that caught her eye. Item 12B, keys found near waterfront. Unconfirmed. She ordered the evidence bag from storage. At first it was routine, she later told reporters. But something about that keychain felt important, like it was waiting for someone to notice. The bag was opened under sterile conditions. Swabs were taken from the metal handle and the floral tag. Within weeks, results came back. And what they revealed was chilling. In March 2024, DNA extracted from the key handle produced a partial profile. When entered into the national database, it matched a sample from Erin Callahan's toothbrush collected back in 2004. That meant the keys were hers. For 20 years, her keys had been lying near the water, proof that she never made it home. But there was something else. Another DNA profile, faint, degraded, appeared mixed on the same handle. Mail. Unknown. A ghost from the past. That trace would be the thread that finally unraveled the mystery. When the results came through, Rachel immediately contacted Detective Marcus Givens, now leading the cold case division. Within days, Erin Callahan's file was reopened for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The news hit her family like a lightning strike. Megan, now in her 40s, described that phone call as surreal. "I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. All I could think was, after all these years, are we finally going to find her?" The NYPD launched a full-scale review, new forensics, digital reconstructions, and AI mapping of Erin's last known movements. It was as if time itself had rewound 20 years. For the first time in 2 decades, the case had momentum. And somewhere out there, a suspect who thought he'd gotten away with it was about to feel the walls closing in. Sometimes, truth doesn't die. It waits. Beneath layers of silence, dust, and memory, it waits. And when the right hands finally reach for it, the past begins to speak. Sometimes, it only takes one overlooked detail, one forgotten fingerprint, one bag of dust-covered evidence, to bring the truth roaring back to life. For nearly 20 years, the disappearance of Erin Callahan haunted New York like a ghost story. But when the Cold Case Integration Unit reopened her file in 2024, no one expected what would come next. When analyst Rachel Mendoza confirmed that the rusted keys belonged to Erin, she didn't just reopen a file, she reignited a storm. Detectives who had long since retired were suddenly back in interview rooms, revisiting old memories. The NYPD's Cold Case Unit launched a full-scale re-examination. Detective Marcus Givens, 42, known for his calm intensity, led the new investigation. He was young when Erin disappeared, still in the academy. Now, 2 decades later, he saw her case as a symbol of how the system sometimes fails those it's meant to protect. He told a local reporter quietly, "We owe her the truth, even if it's 20 years late." The first step was reprocessing every piece of evidence. Not just the keys, but phone logs, bank records, archived surveillance footage, and witness statements stored in aging databases. They used AI enhancement to restore low-resolution video from 2004, frame by frame. And what emerged was something no one had noticed before. The footage from Rivington and Clinton, the last known image of Erin, had always been too grainy to identify anyone clearly. But with new AI-based restoration, faces once lost in shadow were sharpened into focus. There, in the corner of the frame, stood the man in the dark jacket. Tall, broad-shouldered, baseball cap. This time, though, the system picked up a reflection in a nearby car window, a side profile. Enough detail to run through facial recognition software. Within hours, the algorithm returned a 90% match to a name. Daniel Royce, age 48. Back in 2004, Royce had been 28 years old, living just 5 blocks from the bar where Erin was last seen. No prior record. No mention in the original investigation. On paper, he was invisible. But when detectives dug deeper, that invisibility began to crumble. Daniel Royce had been a part-time contractor, working night shifts as a maintenance tech for the city's Department of Transportation, the same department responsible for bridge surveillance systems. Meaning, he had access to the very area where Erin's phone last pinged. But here's where things got chilling. Records showed Royce had abruptly transferred jobs 2 weeks after Erin's disappearance. No forwarding address. No explanation. In 2004, there had been no digital system tracking personnel transfers that tightly. It slipped through the cracks. And for 20 years, he'd simply vanished from the radar. The investigative team began mapping out a digital timeline. Phone pings, witness sightings, city records, all laid out across a virtual reconstruction of 2004 Manhattan. The more they looked, the more a pattern emerged. At 12:06 a.m., Erin's phone pinged near the Williamsburg Bridge. At 12:09, a DOT maintenance access badge was scanned at the same bridge's east side utility entrance, belonging to Daniel Royce. That badge record was never cross-referenced back then. Now, it was undeniable. Erin had crossed paths with Royce that night. Detective Givens began re-interviewing everyone from the original case. Erin's friends remembered little about the man she was seen talking to, only that he seemed familiar, like a face they'd seen before but couldn't place. When Givens showed them an aged-up photo of Royce, the reaction was immediate. One friend gasped, "That's him. He was at the bar that night, sitting near the window." Records confirmed Royce had been there, but under a different tab name, Dan R. The bartender recalled him, too. Quiet guy. Paid cash. Left right after the girl did. That girl was Erin. Using updated digital forensics, the team reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. 11:42 p.m., Erin leaves the Clover Bar. 11:44 p.m., she's seen on CCTV talking to Royce near the curb. 11:48 p.m., both disappear from the frame. 12:06 a.m., Erin's phone pings near the bridge. 12:09 a.m., Royce's work badge is scanned at the bridge maintenance access. 12:17 a.m., bridge CCTV briefly flickers. Maintenance logs later cite routine system reset. For 20 years, that system reset had been accepted as routine. Now, it looked deliberate. Someone had disabled the cameras. Rachel Mendoza continued combing through data. One night, as she sifted through archived maintenance reports from June 2004, she found something odd. A flagged service request filed under Royce's name, marked deleted/incomplete. Its title? Emergency Wiring Repair, East Pedestrian Access Tunnel. That tunnel was directly beneath the bridge, an off-limits area used only by city maintenance crews. It had never been searched in the original investigation. When Givens got the report, he ordered an immediate site re-examination. In May 2024, NYPD forensics units descended on the old maintenance tunnels below the Williamsburg Bridge, a maze of concrete, pipes, and dripping shadows long abandoned. Dust and rust coated everything. Water echoed through the chambers. After 2 decades, it seemed impossible that anything could survive there. But about 30 feet into one sealed section, search teams uncovered a small metal access hatch, bolted shut and painted over. When they pried it open, the air that escaped was foul and stale. Inside lay a pile of debris, old wiring, scrap metal, and fragments of cloth. DNA tests later confirmed what the Callahan family had feared for years. The fabric belonged to the same dress Erin was wearing the night she disappeared. It was the first physical trace of her ever found. When Megan got the call, she said she felt both crushed and relieved. At least now I knew she wasn't just gone without a trace. But it broke me all over again. The discovery reignited public interest. News outlets across the city reopened coverage of the case, calling it the Bridge Mystery Solved, or nearly. For the Callahans, it wasn't closure. It was the reopening of a wound that had never really healed. Erin's parents, both in their 70s, attended every press conference. They'd spent 20 years hoping for answers. Now, all they wanted was truth and justice. Weeks after the fabric was found, the lab called again, this time with something no one expected. The faint male DNA detected on Erin's keys matched the degraded trace recovered from the bridge tunnel fabric. Same person, same location. The odds of coincidence? Less than 1 in a billion. The man who last saw Erin alive was now scientifically tied to the place her belongings were found. Royce's life since 2004 was strangely quiet. He'd moved upstate to a small town outside Albany. No criminal record. Worked as a contractor under his own business name. Neighbors described him as polite, private, and kept to himself. But there were whispers, women in the neighborhood who avoided him. A local waitress said, "He had a stare that made your skin crawl. You couldn't tell what he was thinking, but you knew it wasn't good." When detectives quietly surveilled his property, They noted several old storage units behind his workshop, padlocked, rarely used. A warrant was issued. Inside one of the sheds, police found dozens of discarded electronics, old phones, cameras, memory cards. Most were broken beyond repair, but one flash drive still functioned. When digital forensics recovered its data, the room fell silent. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, street scenes, random faces, crowded bars, and in the middle of it all, Erin Callahan. Images from the night of her disappearance. Some taken from across the street, others zoomed in, candid, as if she'd been followed. Timestamp: June 18, 2004. Hours before she vanished. It wasn't random. It was premeditated. In late July 2024, police moved in. At 6:15 a.m., NYPD units surrounded Royce's property. He was arrested without incident, standing in his driveway in a faded work shirt, coffee mug in hand, calm, almost bored. Neighbors later said he looked unbothered, as if he'd been expecting it. When interrogated, Royce denied everything, claimed he'd never met Erin, that the photos were found, that someone must have framed him. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA, photos, access logs, and, most damning, fragments of the floral keychain still stored in a box in his workshop. The same keychain Erin carried. There was no explaining that away. News of the arrest sent shockwaves through New York. The case that had haunted the city for 20 years was suddenly alive again. Headlines exploded. Erin Callahan case breaks after 2 decades. Former city worker arrested. Vigils reignited. Old friends and strangers gathered by the bridge, holding candles, whispering prayers. Even Detective Soto, now long retired, spoke publicly for the first time in years. I always believed she'd be found. I just didn't think it would take this long. For the Callahan family, the arrest brought a strange mix of relief and dread. They finally had a name. But with that name came 1,000 questions. Why her? Why that night? And how had he hidden for 20 years? Justice, after 2 decades of silence, was finally catching up. But in uncovering the truth, the investigation would reveal something no one was prepared for. A connection between Erin's killer and another forgotten case that would send shockwaves far beyond New York. When police arrested Daniel Royce in July of 2024, it felt like the end of a story, the long-awaited close to a 20-year mystery. But in truth, it was only the beginning. Because what investigators found next would change everything. Not just about Erin Callahan's disappearance, but about what had been happening in New York all along. At first, the case seemed straightforward. DNA on Erin's keys matched Daniel Royce. Her fabric dress had his genetic trace. Photos of her were found in his possession. To the public, it was simple, a predator caught after 2 decades. But inside the precinct, behind those quiet, fluorescent-lit walls, something didn't sit right with Detective Marcus Givens. Royce had been methodical, organized, too careful for a crime of passion. If he'd abducted Erin impulsively, evidence would have spilled everywhere. But there was none, no witnesses, no noise, no trace. It felt rehearsed, practiced. And when Givens looked deeper, he realized, maybe it was. Born in 1976, Daniel Royce grew up in upstate New York, near Poughkeepsie. A quiet child, distant but bright. He studied electrical systems, got a certification in maintenance engineering, and joined the city's Department of Transportation in 2001. No record, no red flags. Colleagues described him as blandly polite. He clocked in, did his work, and disappeared into the background. But as detectives began tracing his employment history, they found something strange. Between 2001 and 2006, Royce had transferred between 5 different city divisions: maintenance, subway repair, bridge wiring, and sanitation. Each move placed him near major transit routes, the same corridors where multiple young women had vanished over those years. None of those disappearances was ever connected. Until now. Rachel Mendoza began cross-referencing Royce's job logs against unsolved cases from that time period. Within days, she found 3 that matched his work locations exactly. Tara Benson, 25, vanished in 2002 near the Manhattan Bridge. Eliza Park, 31, missing 2003, last seen leaving a bar 2 blocks from a Royce work site. Erin Callahan, 2004, final sighting at the Williamsburg Bridge. 3 women, all within 3 years. All near bridge access points Royce serviced. And all, previously, unlinked. When Givens saw the list, his blood ran cold. This wasn't a random act, he said. It was a pattern hiding in plain sight. Investigators went back to Royce's property. They'd already searched his house and shed, but now they looked deeper. Inside the attic, behind a wall panel, officers discovered a small metal lockbox coated in dust. Inside it, old cassette tapes, labeled only by date. The earliest, February 10th, 02. The latest, June 18th, 04. Each date corresponded to a known disappearance. When detectives played the tapes, the recordings sent chills through the entire department. Ambient sounds, city noise, footsteps, and faintly, voices. A man's voice, calm. A woman is frightened. Then silence. Royce had recorded parts of his encounters, possibly for control or to relive them later. It was the kind of evidence detectives dream of and dread at the same time. The kind that ends all doubt, but leaves you wishing you'd never heard it. Royce was brought back in for questioning. Detective Givens sat across from him, the room cold and still. Royce stared at the wall, expression blank, hands clasped. "You followed her, Daniel," Givens said quietly. "You knew her route home. You used your access to get close. You recorded it. We found everything." Royce didn't flinch, didn't blink. Finally, he spoke. "You're late," he said. "You should have come sooner." When Givens pressed, Royce refused to elaborate. No emotion, no confession. He asked for a lawyer and fell silent. But that single line, "You should have come sooner," echoed through every investigator's mind. Because it implied something chilling. Erin wasn't his only victim, and he knew they'd find more. Following Royce's work history, detectives discovered he'd been assigned night shifts across multiple city sites between 2001 and 2005, often unsupervised, with free access to restricted infrastructure areas, bridges, tunnels, river maintenance bays. During those same years, a small but steady number of missing person reports emerged across boroughs. Cases of women walking home alone late at night, last seen near the river. Each investigation hit the same wall. No witnesses, no cameras, no trace. But now, forensics had new power. The team reanalyzed old evidence from those files, clothing fragments, discarded phones, broken jewelry. And in one, the 2003 Eliza Park case, they found a degraded Y chromosome match to Royce. The odds of it belonging to anyone else? Nearly zero. When the connection leaked, media coverage exploded. New York headlines screamed. Bridge maintenance worker linked to 3 cold cases. New York's hidden predator. People were stunned. For 20 years, Royce had lived quietly among them, fixing wires, grocery shopping, chatting with neighbors. A man whose face you wouldn't remember even if you saw it twice. And yet, behind that forgettable exterior, he'd been moving through the city's underbelly, unseen. Former co-workers came forward. One said he'd wander off during shifts. Said he needed to check connections. Sometimes he'd be gone for hours. Another remembered something that now felt sinister. He always knew where the cameras were blind. He told me once, "If you want to disappear in this city, it's easy. You just have to know where it isn't looking." As news broke, families of other missing women began reaching out to police. Some had lived for years without answers, now seeing eerie parallels to Erin's case. Tara Benson's mother, frail but fierce, stood outside the courthouse with trembling hands clutching her daughter's photo. "He's the reason I've been lighting a candle for 20 years, she said. Now I finally know who I've been lighting it for. The Callahan family, meanwhile, remained silent, overwhelmed, broken, but grateful for the truth. Megan released a short statement. We thank the detectives who never stopped believing. Erin's story is every family's worst nightmare. But if her case brings others peace, then her voice wasn't lost. But even as detectives built the case against Royce, a strange development emerged from the forensic lab. A fourth DNA sample, partial and degraded, appeared on the same cassette tapes he'd stored. It wasn't Royce's. It belonged to someone else, another male profile. This second man had never been identified, which meant, for the first time, police considered the unthinkable. Royce may not have acted alone. Detective Givens quietly formed a sub-team to investigate the possibility of a second accomplice, someone who might still be out there. They re-examined Royce's background again, searching for connections. One name surfaced, Elliot Crane, a former coworker and friend who had transferred with Royce between departments in 2003. Crane had died in 2007, an apparent overdose. But when they tested his preserved evidence samples from the autopsy, the results confirmed it. The unknown DNA from Royce's tapes belonged to Crane. Forensic silence filled the lab that night. Two men, two city workers, both with access to infrastructure, blind spots, tunnels, and cameras. Two predators, working together. It was almost too horrific to comprehend. As these revelations surfaced, the case became national news. Documentaries, podcasts, endless speculation about how two city employees could operate undetected for years in the heart of one of the most surveilled cities on Earth. But it made sense, in a terrifying way. They had access, credentials, and insider knowledge of where the city's eyes didn't reach. The tunnels, the bridges, the forgotten spaces beneath New York, places only maintenance staff knew existed. They used the city's skeleton to hide their crimes. And Erin Callahan had been their last known victim. After weeks of silence, something shifted. Royce's lawyer contacted prosecutors. He wanted to talk. During a controlled interview, Royce spoke slowly, detached, never once showing remorse. He didn't confess in the way you might expect. No apology, no justification. He described it as an experiment in control. He and Crane would target women who walked home alone late at night. They'd watch, follow, and observe patterns. Then choose one. Erin, he said, was different. She was cautious, careful. He admired that, so he made her a challenge. When asked why he kept the recordings, Royce said something that chilled every officer in the room. The city forgets people. I didn't want to. Detective Givens ended the interview early. He later told colleagues, I've heard monsters talk before, but this one believed he was preserving history. As evidence piled up, prosecutors prepared charges for 3 murders, and possibly more, pending identification of remains found in the bridge tunnel searches. The trial date was set for early 2025. The city was captivated, horrified, and grieving. Every evening news broadcast replayed Erin's photo, her smiling face beside the headline, Justice After 20 Years. And yet, for many, there was no comfort. Because in uncovering one man's crimes, they'd been forced to face a darker truth about their own city, how easy it had been to look away. In October 2024, the Callahan family finally laid Erin to rest. Her remains, small fragments recovered from beneath the bridge, were buried in a quiet ceremony upstate. No cameras, no media, just family, friends, and candlelight. Megan gave a short eulogy. For 20 years, we searched the city for her. But now I realize she was never lost. She was waiting to be found. Detective Givens attended, standing at the back. As the final words faded into the autumn wind, he said softly to a colleague, sometimes closure doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like opening a door to something you can't unsee. Months passed. Royce remained in custody, awaiting trial. New evidence kept surfacing, a storage locker in New Jersey, a forgotten file in a maintenance archive. Each discovery painted a clearer, darker picture. By December, prosecutors confirmed what many suspected. Royce's crime spanned at least 4 confirmed victims, with the possibility of up to 7. It was one of the largest cold case resolutions in New York's history. But the shock wasn't over yet. Because as journalists dug deeper into Royce's life, interviewing his neighbors, colleagues, old friends, they found something else, something that would make headlines around the world. A connection between Daniel Royce and the Callahan family. In early 2025, during background verification for court proceedings, investigators traced Royce's prior residence history. It revealed that in 1999, 5 years before Erin vanished, Royce had lived in the same apartment building as the Callahan sisters. 2 floors below them. Old tenant records confirmed it. Royce had even signed a maintenance form for the Callahan's unit once, repairing a fuse box in their hallway. He had known of Erin long before 2004. She wasn't random. She was chosen. Detective Givens said later. He'd been watching her for years, waiting for the right time. That revelation broke the city. The idea that Erin's killer had once lived beneath her, smiling, passing in the hall, was almost too much to bear. For 20 years, her family wondered how a person could simply vanish. But the truth was even more haunting. She hadn't been taken by chance. She'd been marked by someone who'd watched her, lived beneath her, and waited for the moment she let her guard down. For 20 years, the city of New York carried the weight of one woman's disappearance. But when her killer was finally unmasked, when the quiet man next door became the monster in every headline, the truth didn't bring peace. It brought shock. Because justice always has a cost. In February 2025, the courtroom at New York County Supreme Court overflowed. Reporters filled every bench. Cameras lined the halls. Outside, hundreds gathered behind barricades, survivors, families of other missing women, and those who had followed the Erin Callahan case since 2004. Inside sat Daniel Royce, now 49 years old, dressed in a plain gray suit, hair trimmed, expression unreadable. He looked like a man waiting for a bus, not a man accused of 4 murders. Across the room sat the Callahan family, Erin's mother clutching a rosary, her sister Megan staring straight ahead, refusing to look at him. The silence when he entered was almost sacred, and when he finally sat, he smiled. Just slightly. The prosecution presented everything, meticulously, relentlessly. The rusted keys from the riverbank. The dress fragments from the bridge tunnel. The cassette tapes, the photos, and the DNA linking Royce to Erin and at least 3 other women. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, a 20-year pattern of control, precision, and cruelty. Prosecutor Linda Monroe addressed the jury with a calm, measured voice. This man used his job to move unseen through our city. He chose his victims carefully. He hid them in the cracks of our infrastructure, in the places we never think to look. He believed he'd never be caught. And for 20 years, he was right. Royce never looked at her, never looked at the jury. His eyes stayed fixed on a point on the wall, detached, disinterested, as if the entire process was beneath him. But then came the recordings. When the first tape played, the courtroom froze. A woman's faint voice echoed from the speakers, nervous, uncertain. The shuffling of feet, the sound of running water. Then, a man's calm voice, Royce's. Stay quiet. It'll be over soon. And then silence. Some jurors cried. Erin's mother fainted. The court adjourned early that day. Royce's attorney tried everything, claiming mental illness, suggesting contamination of evidence, questioning the integrity of 2-decade-old DNA samples. But the science was ironclad. Every test had been verified, every chain of custody documented. And then came the most damning testimony. Rachel Mendoza, the forensic analyst who reopened the case. She described the moment she matched the DNA on the keys. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. It felt like she'd been waiting for us, she said. Like Erin was still here, helping us find her. The courtroom fell silent. Outside the courthouse, Vigils burned every night. Candles, posters, flowers, names of the other women connected to Royce are now known to the world. Tara Benson, Eliza Park, Erin Callahan, and several more names are newly under review. The press called it the Ghost Bridges case. A story of forgotten victims has finally been given back their voices. But for those who'd lived through it, the families, the detectives, the communities, closure didn't feel like healing. It felt like reopening a wound that had never truly closed. Detective Marcus Givens told a journalist, "People ask me if catching him feels good, but all I can think about is how long he walked free, how many times someone looked him in the eye and never knew." Court-ordered psychiatric evaluations revealed little. He was sane, methodical, emotionally detached. The doctors described him as having a compulsive need for control, masked by an ability to appear ordinary. He didn't kill for pleasure, or hate, or revenge. He killed for order, his own twisted idea of balance. In one chilling evaluation note, he told a psychologist, "The city forgets people. I remember them. That's the difference between me and everyone else." When asked why he recorded his victims, he simply said, "So they wouldn't vanish." That sentence, "so they wouldn't vanish," became the line that echoed through every media outlet, every headline, every late-night podcast. A sentence that blurred the line between delusion and evil. After a 6-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the entire courtroom stood still. No one breathed. The foreperson read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. 4 murders, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 of evidence tampering. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the words were read, Royce didn't move. No anger, no regret. Just that same faint smile, as if the verdict had been expected all along. Then, something strange happened. As officers led him away, Royce turned, not toward the judge, not toward the cameras, but toward Erin Callahan. Their eyes met for one brief, unbearable second. He mouthed 2 words. No sound, just shape. I waited. Megan froze. Detective Givens immediately stepped forward, blocking her view. But the damage was done. Those 2 words would haunt her for the rest of her life. After the verdict, the Callahan family released a statement. It read, "Erin was love. Erin was light. For 20 years, we searched for her in the dark, and today, justice brought a flicker of light back into our lives. To every family still searching, don't stop. The truth never really dies." The community rallied behind them. Scholarships were created in Erin's name. The city council announced a new cold case forensics fund dedicated to processing long-stored evidence. Because of Erin's case, dozens of others were now being reopened. But amidst the relief, there was also unease. Because Royce had spoken only once more during sentencing. And what he said left everyone in that courtroom cold. March 10th, 2025. The courtroom was packed again for the sentencing hearing. Judge Elena Ruiz addressed Royce directly. "You've taken from this city its daughters, its sisters, its friends. You've hidden behind concrete and darkness. You thought you could erase them. But they endured. And so will their memory, longer than you ever will." When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Royce stood. He straightened his suit, looked toward the crowd, not at the Callahans, not at the cameras, but at the ceiling, and said calmly, "The city keeps its secrets. I just helped it remember them." The room erupted, gasps, outrage, tears. But Royce remained motionless. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. As he was escorted out, the gallery rose, silent, unified, a sea of faces watching the man who'd haunted their city finally disappear behind a door that would never open again. In the months that followed, documentaries and podcasts dissected every detail. The Ghost Bridges case became a national symbol of resilience, of justice delayed but not denied. But for those who lived it, the story never really ended. Detective Givens retired soon after. Rachel Mendoza transferred to the National Cold Case Unit, where she continues to work today, often saying Erin's case changed the way she sees evidence. "You never throw anything away," she said in an interview. "Because one day, a fingerprint, a hair, a single key might speak louder than any witness ever could." Erin Callahan visits the river every year on June 18th, the date her sister disappeared. She leaves a single key in the water, rusted, floral, just like the one they found. "It's her way of telling me she made it home," she said softly. And so, the story comes full circle. A city that never sleeps, a bridge that remembers, and a name, Erin Callahan, that became more than just a tragedy. She became the voice that forced the world to listen. In 2004, Erin vanished into the dark. In 2024, the dark finally spoke back. Because the truth is, monsters don't live in the shadows. They live next door. They fix your lights. They wave in the hallway. And for 20 years, no one saw him. Until the city finally did.